Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Data, the Lifeline of Your Company's Culture. Just before we start our webinar, just a few housekeeping items that I'll cover. There is a Q&A at the end, where you can enter your questions at any time in the box on your console. There's a resource window also located on your console where you can download some resources that are related to the topic. And we are recording this webinar, and we will be sending you the link. Today's presenters are Jared Hillam of Intricity and Dana Fiddler of Looker. At this time, I'll pass it on to Jared.
Thanks so much, Sanjita, and thanks everybody for joining us today. What I'll do first is just tell you a little bit about who I am and about some of my background here. So I've been in the data management and business intelligence space for over 15 years now, or going on 16 years. And over that time, we created this channel. I'm the creator and author of this channel called Intricity 101, and it's used by about 150 universities worldwide, and it's used by big consulting companies like Accenture, et cetera, to train their internal staff on topics like data management, data integration, business intelligence, et cetera. And what we've done is created these, 4-minute videos that are really straightforward and make it possible for people to get their heads around some of these complex topics. So I'd invite you to go and take a look at that. And the focus of Intricity, who we are as an organization, is we're a consulting company. We come in and help organizations through their journey to actually deploy these systems that turn data into information that's actionable and that the business can work with. And we've done it across a lot of different kinds of organizations. So we're not a small mom and pop shop, but we're also not the Deloittes and Accentures of the world, these ginormous organizations. So we're a very approachable company. And we've done this kind of work across many different kinds of organizations. And over the years, as we've gone and done this, we've noticed a pattern. And the pattern is that we love, in the world of technical and business process, we love to talk about people, process, and technology. It comes up in dozens of presentations. It always comes up: people, process, and technology. It's always out there. But what seems to be always missing is the aspect of culture. And the famous quote from Peter Drucker comes to mind, which is, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the reason that quote is so powerful is because we all know this in our bones. We know this is true, that if people can adopt a culture that is conducive to getting the business moving forward, then it'll be much more powerful than just someone pushing out a strategy into the organization. And there's a quote out of one of the white papers that's connected to this event, which is one of the white papers I wrote, that talks about how culture is not some kind of feel-good way of doing business, but rather culture is how we influence the decisions that people make every day. And so then you start asking yourself questions like, how do people derive the culture of your organization? Is it actually through these poster boards that you see about teamwork and leadership, et cetera? Is it just these one-word slogans that drive our culture? And I believe, and just from seeing this across the years of doing consulting, that people actually derive the culture on what actions they see. It's really the actions that determine what people believe. And we know this to be true as well, just intuitively. If we see someone say one thing, but then do another, it really doesn't matter what they said. It's all about the actions. What are the actions in your organization? What do people witness as the actions? It's not so much about the messaging, although that does play an influence. It's really about the actions of the organization. So the question is, what are the signals of the actions? And when you get down to it, the signals of the actions are ultimately represented as data, right? So we've got dashboards and analytics and reports and data extracts and key performance indicators. All of these feeds of data turned into information are how people come to an awareness of what the culture of the organization ultimately is. Of course, there's other factors. There's the the communications that happen internally, et cetera. But again, it's about what are the actions that they see inside the organization. What's the activity? But the ultimate question here is not necessarily, whether data influences the culture. The question is whether we can actually, as an executive management team, engineer the culture, mold the culture we want, and drive that culture through the data. And this whole concept came to me about 11 years ago. We were working on a very interesting engagement. I'll tell you about it. This was an engagement with a high fashion retailer. They're a global high fashion retailer. Again, this is about 11 years ago. And as we started in this engagement, we were working on some other things, but there was a problem that emerged. The issue that they had is that their sales staff that was in the stores, they were not actually actively approaching customers. Rather, what they would do is they'd find a cash register that had a lot of foot traffic, and then they would park themselves at that cash register. And then they would just ring the register because just of where they were sitting, that was the register that was going to get rung up the most. And so they really didn't have a culture of really approaching customers, upselling, cross-selling, helping the customers find the products that they wanted. And so they came up with a fairly expensive but very effective training program, which they were really excited about. And they rolled out the training program globally. So they trained all of these sales reps in this new method. And the new method taught, number one, you sell high fashion items, okay? We don't want to be selling underwear and socks because Walmart's going to have the lowest margins on that, and we can't beat Walmart at underwear and socks. We want to be selling high fashion, high expense items. We also want to have a lot of upselling going on. So we should see a lot of items in the person's basket, not just two. And so this was part of the training, and they rolled this out to their sales team. And there were obviously other things that were very important as part of this training. So once the training was finished, the management kind of sat back and, was ready to see some big results. But nothing happened. Time went by, and the needle didn't move. And this issue had occurred, and we were actually doing some consulting on something else at the time, and they said, do you think you could help us with this? And what we started to do was investigate their training program and the problems they were trying to solve, and we started looking for signals, the signals that would tell us when a rep had sold high fashion items, and when a rep had sold many things in one basket, and when a rep had a high dollar amount. We encapsulated those into performance indicators on a per rep basis, and then we worked with their team to come up with a comp plan that was not related to, how many times did you ring the register, but how well or how many of the register rings that you did had a high basket value, a high variety of items, and high fashion items. So that was it. Those were the three goals. And we put this on a chart, and this chart sat in the break room. And you could see everybody's performance. Every sales rep could see everybody else's performance and their own performance on the same chart inside the break room. This was a groundbreaking event for them. It totally changed their sales culture. All of a sudden, the veterans that had figured out which foot traffic cash registers were the most profitable and then just park themselves there, they weren't making the money anymore. The reps that were making the money were the ones that were actually reaching out to customers, talking with them about what they had in their basket of goods and helping them find high fashion items. So that completely changed the outlook of it. And it completely changed the way I perceived the impact of data on the culture of the organization. And there's a couple of lessons learned that I took from that I want to share with you today. And I'm just going to share a few. The first one is, when you have something like a key performance indicator or a dial on a dashboard, and that dial is tied somehow to the performance of the individual that is, that receives that data, it's really important that that person understand how they can change that, how they can move that dial. Most people, when we go in and talk with them about the information that they're getting about their performance, they don't know how to move the dial. They don't know how the key performance indicator works. Some long lost employee, from 2 years ago actually was told what that meant, but the guy that's there now has no clue. This is so common inside of organizations. And so it's absolutely critical that when we roll out a KPI, that the mechanism for changing that KPI is self-evident in the UI, so that the users always know how to change their behavior in order to influence that key performance indicator. The other thing that is, and I just dealt with this 2 weeks ago, is how management deals with bad results. So, what often occurs, and like I said, I guess I'll give you the example from 2 weeks ago. So we were talking with a chief data officer, and he had just finished a survey within his organization. And in this survey, they reviewed all of the performance of all of the divisions that reported into him. And the survey results had a lot of red, a lot of red indicators, a lot of problems that were pretty serious, a few yellow indicators, and some green. But when he went to take that information to the board of directors, there wasn't that much red. It was mostly green, like you see on the right. It's mostly, we're doing okay. We got a few yellow patches here, but we're doing okay. And I told him about Alan Mulally. Back in 2008, if you remember, the car industry was getting a huge bailout. And all of the other car vendors took a bailout. And Alan Mulally decided to stick it out. And he didn't take the bailout. Took a huge risk in doing that. But as he was managing Ford at the time and working with the management, he used this heat map dashboard to drive the meeting. And the purpose of it was to say, if it's green, okay. If it's red, we need to address something. But it was always green. It was constantly green every time. And he famously said, well, we're going to lose $18 billion this year. So is there anything that's not going well with this company? So he kind of got after the direct reports for, just basically having these glaze over meetings. Well, so the following week, they were having a product launch, and the launch wasn't going well, and the director over that product launch decided to put a red indicator on the heat map. Everybody in the room expected that Alan was going to fire that employee. Now Alan Mulally had been there hadn't been there for years and years and years. He was the new CEO of Ford. Instead of getting upset about it, he clapped and he said, "This is great visibility. What can we do to help?" And this is the type of behavior that is often absent inside of organizations. They don't know how to deal with the negative news. So rather than applauding the negative news in terms of being aware that it's happening, they get upset about it, and then lo and behold, there's no bad news. Everything's green pastures, even while you're losing $18 billion. So management has got to understand what a negative indicator means. It's an opportunity to change behavior, to change a process. It's an opportunity to be focused on fixing something, rather than pretending everything is okay. Another lesson learned that we've encountered actually comes out of the technology side. See, we've noticed over the years that data visualization tools on the market have really taken the market by storm. A lot of data visualization tools out there, really enabling these analysts. It's cool stuff. It's very engaging visually. And it provides a lot of enablement to analysts. The challenge is that these organizations that have adopted this model of having super mobilized analysts, when they go and request that these analysts produce a strategic view of the organization, they end up getting 100 versions of the truth, because each analyst is an island unto itself, unto himself or herself. They're an island to their own analytics. There's no centralization. And so what they get is meetings that they can't make decisions on because there's too many versions of conflicting truth. We've also seen the opposite happen, where strategic initiatives drive the development of a pre-calculated executive level view of the organization. And it's specifically driven to help the strategy of the organization and drive them to make better decisions. But the challenge is, on the technology side, because they pre-calculate all the results, they get an environment that they cannot share with the tactical organization. It's too baked. It's too aggregated for them. So when they want to share it down to the operation, they're stuck. They can't get it down to that level. And they also, even though that looks pretty, when you pre-calculate, things can look really cool because as you click, things move and whatnot. But when you pre-calculate that like that, you pre-bake all of your results. It's a very tight coupling of the calculation to the data. And so it makes it so you have a sporadic reach into the organization. We see this all the time, a variation between these two strategies of deployment. A lot of it's technology oriented rather than really thinking solution first. So the question is, can we create an environment where both strategic and tactical stakeholders can do analytics? And the answer is yes, but it requires conformity. So conformity is being the key word here because a lot of organizations have data lakes. Data lakes do not provide conformity. What they provide is centralization. They centralize all the data throughout all the organization, but they do not provide the conformity of the data. So think of it this way. If I have date and time as a data point, and I'm receiving date and time from 100 different applications, and I've got one summarized by quarter and another one summarized by marketing events and et cetera, I do not have a consistent view of date time. But I want to be able to provide that for my organization. The same is true for any other attribute of your company, customer, product, et cetera. You need to have consistency so that both the tactical teams and the strategic teams can both work from the same view of the truth. The next point that you want on this, with working in conjunction with the conformed data warehouse, is something called a metadata layer. What this provides us is the ability to control all of the data objects that land in our visualizations centrally. So you can centrally control all of the data objects that everybody's using in all of their analyses. Now, why would this be necessary? Well, about 13, 14 years ago, when I first got my start in the business intelligence industry, we started encountering a problem. These business intelligence tools that provided reporting, they nested the logic for how the data came together, the SQL query for how the data came together with the visualization. And that's how most of the BI tools did it back then. The problem that occurred is when you have 2,000 visualizations over time that you've generated, and you need to make a change to a calculation, you've got to open that visualization up 2,000 times to edit all of those different visualizations that have been created inside of your organization. So you want to centralize all of that logic for how data comes together. So let's talk about what this might look like. So if you see on the right, I have data objects. In the center, I've got a query editor. And let's say I click on the product name. So look on the right-hand side, you'll see product name. If I click on the product name in a metadata layer, what it's going to do is produce a SQL query that will retrieve that product name from the data warehouse. Let's say I pick product category. Same thing happens. Now all of a sudden I've got additional points that I'm acquiring from the data warehouse, and et cetera. So what you can see is when we have a business intelligence tool with a metadata layer, then what I have is essentially Lego blocks that I'm providing to both the strategic as well as the tactical audiences in my organization. I'm no longer bound by one or the other. I now have analysts that can use this data, but I also have business stakeholders that can use this data. This is the power of Looker's approach. Looker is a born-in-the-cloud company that has created a BI platform that delivers a best-in-class metadata layer for querying the data. So to give you a little bit more about who Looker is, I'm going to pass the time over to Dana, and then we'll do some questions.
Thanks, Jared. That was great. So kind of really picking up from where Jared teed us up here, why Looker? Well, very similar to what Jared was discussing earlier, is companies that generally approach us with one of two issues, and sometimes both. First off, with their BI tool that they currently have, either they have a data bottleneck, so I submit a request to IT, hopefully in the next 6 months they can produce the report I need. By the time I get the report, it's out of date. I don't even remember why I requested it, or I went off and I did something else. And in that case, what a lot of people do is that something else where they go get a data extract, and we kind of refer to that as data chaos. So now they go in, they get an extract of the data from IT. They do some desktop wrangling. They come up with some nice visualizations. They show up at the meeting to address the question. And then suddenly everybody, because they had their own interpretation of the truth, all have different visualizations. So instead of looking to drive the business, you're now trying to figure out why people's numbers don't match. And or, as Jared mentioned earlier, why all the numbers look so good, yet you have a significant loss going on. So when you think of this, what so many companies nowadays do is we move into this next generation of business intelligence, next generation of doing business, building these data-driven cultures. You kind of want the best of both worlds of what we've seen from the BI space. We want the data governance, the standardization, and the scalability, but we also want an easy-to-use end-user tool that people who are non-technical, who don't understand the data, can come in and have true self-service. They can come in, they can build their own ad hoc analysis without needing to know anything about the data, have that consistency, and move on to the next steps of their day. So what makes Looker different from the other BI and analytics tools on the market? Really, we differentiate ourselves in three basic ways. First off, the world of databases has really changed in the last 5 to 10 years. You have this introduction of these new high-performance databases, MPP, things like Amazon Redshift, Google BigQuery, databases that were built specifically to run high volumes of data very quickly. So Looker saying, why do I want to move that data into memory? Why do I want to work on a subset? Let's take advantage of that high processing power, take advantage of my investment in that database. The second thing is we are born in the cloud, so we are a web application, very easy to access the product. Everybody's coming in through the same URL, so whether you're a developer, a power user, or somebody who just wants to come in and look at a report and leave, you're all coming in through the same access point, which makes it very easy to share, collaborate, and send across the organization. Now, just because we're a web application doesn't mean that we have to reside in the cloud. We do have customers that have us on-prem behind the firewall. We have them hosting in their own private VPC. the real thing here is that we're operating like a web application. So we scale easily and we're very easy to collaborate. And then the most important differentiator that I think Jared did a great job of teeing up to really is our LookML data modeling layer. So this is where you're going to go in, define the data once. This will be a handful of more sophisticated people who understand the database, who understand what the metrics are behind the different numbers, so that we have a company standard for revenue. You define revenue in that model. You build it once, and then you share that model out to the end users so that they are going to come in and build a number of different dashboards, a number of different reports. Revenue might appear in 100 different visualizations, but it's all coming from that single source. So if I change revenue once, all 100 revenue definitions update. So the next time somebody logs in and wants to run a report, you know that you have the latest metrics. You know that it's clearly defined by the organization. Somebody hasn't changed it. And then, you know, a lot of people, you hear people talking nowadays a lot about visualization, and it's very popular and it's great. It's a quick, easy way to define and interact with your data. But again, trying to make data part of your culture is really integrating data into how people are interacting with the data on a day-to-day basis. So with Looker, we do have visualizations like all the other products on the market. But then we also look at ways of integrating the data into your people's daily behavior. So this might be pushing results out to a third-party application through things like our webhooks here. That might be dropping results into something like an S3 bucket for future follow-up, archiving. It may be embedding into third-party applications. One of the very popular things that we see with our customers is embedding Looker into their Salesforce instance. We do that here at Looker. When I first started, I didn't realize all these great reports I had were actually Looker in Salesforce. But what we're able to do is take that Salesforce data, combine it with the help desk data, combine it with financial data, so that your salespeople can live where they work. They're not having to go out to a third-party BI tool, build something from scratch. It's now embedded into my daily process. And we've even taken it to the next level of interacting with Looker through third-party applications. So a favorite here again at Looker is really our Slack bot. I'm going to go do a sales meeting in Chicago. I want to find out who my top 10 customers are. Go into Slack, ask it. It queries Looker. I get my results. I did not have to go look at a report. I can continue it in my chat with my team while we're setting up the meeting. We come to the agreement, and we move on to the next thing. So really what defines a Looker customer is a company that wants to be data-driven, a company that wants to enable its end users to go out, be confident in the data that they're working with, make decisions, and be a contributor to the organization. Our customers range from 5 employees up to Fortune 50 accounts across a wide variety of verticals. We've got some very cool logos, and we've got companies that have been around for many, many years who are now looking to modernize and stay competitive in today's economy. So with that, you know, definitely if you want more information, I'll put Jared and my contact information up on the screen. But we're also open to any questions that you might have.
I see one data here. It says, yeah, I was going to say, does the metadata layer require the data warehouse? So the answer is no. A metadata layer, you can model it against any database, essentially. The benefits, of course, of having a data warehouse are driving the conformity of your data. But certainly, as far as like running proof of concepts and just getting started with something, you don't have to have a data warehouse in place. You can start just against any database. You model against it. And you can describe how the query strategy works to getting the data that you need for analytics. So you can kind of go through an evolution inside of the metadata layer in Looker.
Cool, and I think there was a second question there for you as well, Jared. Let
me see here. How does the metadata layer differ from issuing SQL queries by hand? If we know how to write SQL, wouldn't it be just as good? Yeah, so I think I talked a little bit about this. So the question is, how does it differ from just writing SQL? Because as you saw in the query editor there, SQL was being generated. So if you know how to write SQL, why would I go through this process? The technical reason why it's called tight coupling. You want to avoid tight coupling in your architecture. Tight coupling means that the visualization is tightly coupled with the query. In other words, I can't break those apart because one drives the other. Loose coupling allows me to manage the metadata layer separate from the specific SQL query itself, so that if I need to make a change to the logic, I can do so, and it'll change all of my reports that leverage that object. So loose coupling is much more scalable than usually tight coupling is. Let's see, there's another one. What level of expertise is required to implement and administrate the program? I'm assuming you're talking about Looker. Looker is actually really quite easy to adopt. There's a markup language that helps you design the metadata layer, but it's very friendly and very easy to get your head around. So usually when we do enablement sessions, we're able to get you running within like a week, get you everything moving, really get you connected to your data and engaged in showing results. Often we've been able to pull these off in just days, just depending on how ready your data is and if we already have our hands on the data. Sometimes we'll do Looker demonstrations as part of database proof of concepts, just because it's so easy to set up for us. And of course, with anything, time is really going to be time will be on your side. As more time you spend with it, the more time you hone it in to exactly what the business needs, the greater it'll service your business users. And that's all the questions that I see so far.
Any other questions from anyone out there? I'm just going to move to Jared and my contact information while we do that one last ask for questions. But
and certainly, if there's any other questions, we can, if we miss them here, we can answer them after.
Yeah. Well, that was great, Jared. Thank you so much for joining us today.